Okay. So let's see. We covered. Oh, you remember that. We covered sound systems. We covered phonetics, phonology, sound change rules. Hopefully, that was all clear on possibilities for what you can do with that. Next, phonotactics. So, the easiest way to do this is by giving an example first. So, has anyone finished their phonetics inventory?
What's the phonetic?
Phonetic inventory, sorry. The subset of these sounds that you're actually going to be using. That works. Okay. So, do.
It's not in IPA because I wrote it before I found IPA. Which one besides they're hard to read?
So, have you written the homework down? I'll just erase this for space. So what we have is do. Alveopalatal. Oh, you mean this? No, that's retroflex. What do you mean by TL?
What?
What's this?
Oh, it doesn't exist on the IPA chart. Oh, it's probably a TL with a line with a curve over the top.
Oh, okay, that's
So,
a combination of two.
yeah.
So okay. I'll omit that for now. So do. Sure.
Probably an X.
Blah blah blah. This is. Sure, that's not on the IPA because it's not a second sound. LL.
LH. I know it's on the IPA somewhere.
LH.
That Welsh
Pronounce
sound.
it. Alveopalatal. Lateral fricative? I guess. I'm gonna guess that's this.
Yeah, I think that's it.
But I'm not sure. Is that right?
Yeah.
I
There's a Y sound somewhere, but I couldn't remember where it fits on the chart.
Y is a glide.
Uh-huh.
It's actually a vowel.
Okay.
Sometimes glides are put on the consonant chart. Sometimes they're put on the vowel. So whatever. And vowels. Let's assume they're all equal. Well, let's just assume it's.
It's the I with the line through it. The line through the, going across the vertical line through the bottom, I think.
Vertical line through it? Oh,
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And the others we
called-
haven't figured out yet.
What O are you using?
Oh,
O.
yeah.
O. I think that might be this,
Okay.
but I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it's that, but I'm not sure. Eat, but flatter.
Cat. Ah.
Oh, cat. Ah.
Ah.
Okay, so that's
E is A.
Okay, so this is our phonetic inventory that we're using. Alphabet includes, oh, that's writing system.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so, phonotactics is what combinations of these make a legal syllable. So, for one, what is the minimum requirement for a syllable? Do you remember? What has to be in the center?
Vowel?
Yeah. Okay. So are you going to consider your laterals to be vowels? Or vowel equivalent? Can they be syllabic?
I don't think so.
Okay. So no syllabic consonants in that case.
Well, the Y, maybe. Possibly.
But
Not expected.
the Y is a glide, so the I.
Okay.
So anyway, so these are vowels. So vowels required. Alright? So, can any of these sounds, the consonants, go at the front of a syllable?
Yeah.
So like, for example, fa, da, la, la, etc. Those are all fine. Okay. So, any consonant. Can you have a word the syllable that starts without a consonant?
Yeah.
So, optional. Do you have syllables that end with codas? Like, for example, that, or that, or etc.
Yeah.
Okay. But not required.
No.
Okay, so that's usually pretty common, just this color. Now, the tricky part is, well, Japanese doesn't have the codas, but the tricky part is where you have clusters. So, can you combine, say, any of these letters in succession before the vowel? Like, for example, tha. Is that okay?
No.
Tha.
No.
What ones are okay?
If there's a cluster before the vowel, there can be an approximate or nasal before the vowel,
Like,
with the L or M. It can be any consonant at the beginning,
okay.
and then an approximate or nasal.
Okay,
And
so
then
only
vowel.
two.
Yeah.
You don't have any with three consonants.
No.
Okay, so you've got this order, and you've got
Although
C.
some of those consonants count
lat.
as. Yeah. An approximate or nasal.
Oh.
And then potentially any two consonants at the end.
Any two.
Yeah.
So,
Theoretically.
In any
I may
order?
come up with rules that don't.
like for example, by your rules,
Yeah.
so nasal or approximate, for example, no. So an example would be thnash. Is that okay?
Yep.
Thnash. Thnashel. Thnashel, rather. Thnashel. Consonant.
Maybe.
Thnashen.
Can't end with a nasal.
Okay. So can either of these be a nasal? Like, for example, instead of Thnashen, Fnanch. Fnanch.
Yeah. It,
So, yeah, no.
haven't gotten that far.
That's okay. That's what we're doing now.
Okay.
Does it sound okay? Which is essentially the way you're going to determine it, unless you've got a top-down reason. Do you have any top-down reasons to care about your phonotactics?
Not that relate to that.
Okay.
Voiced and unvoiced are interchangeable is not the right word. Considered the same thing. A word will contain either all voiced or all unvoiced, but not mix them.
considered the same thing. So
It's the same word in the language, whether it's pronounced with voice
Okay.
or voice.
so then it's not discriminatory, but
But they do switch.
okay. But that's not
That's not related to this.
I don't think that is strictly phonotactics.
That'd be dialogue, like regional, dialectal.
Dialectal. The dialectal isn't a category of grammar allowed.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, but dialectal changes come under grammar categories. Like you have dialectal phonotactics, you have dialectal phonology, etc. So let's just say this is it for now. And obviously you can constrain it more. So really it's not that hard. You figure out what consonants can come in what order, what sounds decent, really, to your ear. But then again, maybe you have some other reasons. For reference, this is the syllable structure for English. So syllable is maximally an S followed by a P, T, or K, followed by L, R, W, J, and O. So STRA is a viable onset cluster. So do you see how that works? This is saying for a three consonant onset, you can have S followed by one of these, followed by one of these.
So, kubut. Okay, and
Squash.
squash. What about spool?
Split. True. There are exceptions. So those are written separately.
Okay.
So that's saying some combinations of these aren't acceptable. So you have a separate list of what combinations aren't acceptable. Like what?
Okay,
We don't have-
is that not acceptable because it's currently not in the dictionary, or just not acceptable for...
Oh, well, that's essentially, is it attested or not? Like, does this combination not exist simply because we don't happen to have words for it, but if we created new words, and which we do all the time, then maybe it would be used? Well, I strongly doubt that the combination PW on an onset in English would ever be used. Like, flower, flower.
Until somebody notices that it's not used in any commercial branding.
Point. Or if it's translated from some other language, maybe. But usually translations fit the phonotactics and the phonology of the language they're being put into. Like if you remember my example from Japanese, the reason you have that sound change rule is that Japanese phonotactics is CV. Period. It doesn't allow any clusters. It doesn't allow codas. So when you translate from a language that does have clusters or codas, you have to break them up with vowels and just insert vowels in between all of them. Except for N, which allows to be syllabic. So that's that. Vowel again, you can have syllabics in place of that if you want. English does it. For example, squirrel, earl are both arguably syllabic R and L. Although also arguably you're pronouncing it with a extremely reduced vowel. But that depends on how you want to represent it. Okay, another one is, let's see, here's an example. Can someone other than Yuri pronounce this?
You don't like my pronunciations?
No, because you speak Russian. This is no brackets. This is phonetic transcription. Do you know what an X is? Yeah. So that's a ooh. Go on, try. Yuri?
What? How do you pronounce pronounce each of those independently because
This is the word out loud in Russian.
Sluch.
Sluch.
Although it's actually a V, not an F.
No, it's not.
Well,
It's,
maybe pronounced, but it's written V.
it's written with a V, but Russian
Sluch.
would change a V to an F for that.
Sluch.
Sluch.
Sometimes. Actually.
Unless you,
Sluch.
unless
Somewhere borderline.
unless you really separate the sluch,
Yeah.
you say sluch with an F.
Yeah.
It's a good example, though. So that's an example that will never occur in English because FSL is not an allowable concept cluster. But in Russian, it's perfectly fine. Another one is
Whenever I think sort of in English, it seems, like FSL seems horrible, but then writing in Russian seems okay.
yeah, exactly. Here's another one. It's frog, I believe.
What's the first letter?
M.
Frog is Pushka, like that in Goa.
So anyway, again, not going to happen. So essentially what you want to do is put together all sorts of combinations of natural classes, really, in your phonetic inventory. Put them together, see if they sound decent, or if you want them to be acceptable. Theoretically, you could string together probably up to a dozen consonants. It is technically speaking pronounceable. However, whether you want to do this or not is a separate question. It'll also make it, interesting to listen to.
And can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is the first word actually one syllable?
Yes. Sluch.
I find it very hard to pronounce with only. I know you can, but I mean.
Yeah, I know. That's the point. This is the reason I gave this example. So yes, both of these are one-syllable words in Russian. Otherwise, it wouldn't have.
It's derived from two syllables.
Yeah,
But
it's pronounced as one. This is actually sluch. I don't remember how to write it, but it's two words. The f is from v, which is actually a morpheme, a bound morpheme that means in or out. Approximately in, but it's used. It's used sort of metaphorically for out loud. Sluch itself is hearing. It's hearing or sound and things like that. So in hearing out loud, approximately. What is it in Czech?
Sluch people, that is also like in or about, and sluch is like sound. So sluch people bedolas tak louder maybe?
How would you say out loud? Like saying something out loud.
Já bych to řekl nahlas. It's a different word.
Okay.
no.
But I mean the roots are the same.
Okay. So there you go. He can pronounce it. You can pronounce it. I can pronounce it. The rest of you have difficult. So something to consider. Another thing you can do is you can have multiple phonotactics. Like you can say you have a couple different classes of words, and this structure is okay for one, this structure is okay for the second, this structure is okay for the third, and then you use the different classes separately. Like for example, you can have one class for verbs, you can have one class for nouns, you can use them for whatever you want. Just an idea. Another thing is that sometimes you can have it such that your phonotactics changes depending on where it is in the word. Like, for example, what if this is an okay syllable by itself, if it were a one-syllable word? But you don't want to have clusters between vowels like this. Right? So this would be, for example, vashishk, right? For example. What if that sounds bad to you? So you can say that this is allowed at the beginning, this is allowed in the middle, and that's allowed at the end. Or some combination, whatever. Maybe you want all words to end with a vowel. which is useful for some things. So another idea that you might want to implement. And onset and offset clusters usually are different. For example, in English, STR is perfectly valid at the beginning of a syllable, like straight. But can anyone think of a word that ends with STR?
STR, that's like almost, if you give me pronounced STR, that's like the name Chester, but Chester, if someone's saying it.
But that's not
quickly.
Chester, that's...
There's an E there, but if someone's saying it fast enough, Chester.
Nope, that's still...
Chester.
That's
Chester.
Chester.
Stir.
So the way this is one syllable.
Stirring, Chestering.
St is the maximum.
Give me an example with its STR without like strong, chest strong, Chester.
You would never say chest strong.
You wouldn't.
You might have chest wrong, yes. And you have obviously chest. So ST is legal.
And TR
But
is
to pronounce it without this being syllabic, this R with a line is syllabic R. It's approximately equivalent to R with a schwa. R with a schwa.
Schwa.
Because that's... So, chest,
Like in
I
French,
find it
chestre, or something like that?
maybe
No?
chest.
Because we don't pronounce
I'm
the
not
end
sure.
of the E's. So, I don't know.
Yeah, that might be right, but I'm not sure. I find it hard to pronounce. Anyway, so I'm not a good
Just
fan.
because you find it hard to pronounce doesn't mean it's not in the language.
I'm a native speaker, so anything that I find hard to pronounce is probably not in English. Unless I have a speech deficit, but I don't.
it's the TR at the end.
Yeah, but it's perfectly valid at the beginning. So again, just remember that when
Just
you're making it. So syllabaries, like for example, Japanese, don't really have much of a phonotactics. You have a consonant and a vowel, and that's it. Mainly because each letter is composed of a consonant and a vowel, like sa. That's it. So it's not possible to write clusters really, except for N, and like I said. And the fact that they consider affricates to be one sound for the purposes of this. Okay, so you might or might not have different rules for how many, like for example, what things are allowed in front of each other, depending on the number of consonants you have in the cluster. Like for example, maybe straight is fine, but trait isn't, or maybe kvack is fine, but skvack isn't. Like maybe it gets more tight rules the more consonants you have, for example. Like I'm pretty sure you can come up with two consonant clusters, onset clusters in English, that aren't in this list, right?
How do you denote elongation of a consonant or a vowel? And that can be used for anything, right?
Yes.
How do you denote elongation of elongation? Another one?
You don't.
What if like language has that? What if a
What-
language makes a difference between, say, and ah?
Oh, that's multiple. No, then you've got short.
Short as ah, and this is like, suppose it's like there's ah,
Half long. Full long. And that's all that IPA is capable of. If you need, and just sort of usual. If you need more than 4, then you're going to have to come up with your own way of writing that. So, yes, it's been done. Okay. Do. And generally, try to define things by natural classes or features, like I've been trying to emphasize. In this case, it's actually listed by specific phones, or phonemes rather. So it's okay, but if you can generalize your rules, do so. Another thing that phonotactics could be used for is in machine translation for self-bounding. Like if you happen to know anything about machine translation or transcription of natural language processing, one of the main problems is that it's very difficult to tell where a word ends. Because when I am actually talking, if I am talking normally and I'm not making significant pauses between words, my sound is coming out pretty much as a continuous stream, and the only reason that you're parsing it into separate words is because you know the words and you have a cognitive thing that you're implying, but the sound itself isn't being parsed into separate words, like I am doing now. It sounds very choppy if I do. So one way you can get around this is, if you want machine translation, is to define your phonotactics such that it is impossible to confuse something within a word for a end of a word, beginning of a word cluster. Right? So if you have, say, a word that ends with some particular cluster and another word that begins with some particular cluster, if you say that it has to end with it, these are sort of required components, and that the combination of the two is not possible within a word, then it's clear that that's a word boundary. Or if you say, for example, all words end in some particular set of consonants that are not allowed anywhere else in the word, or whatever else, just so that it's clear where the word boundary is. If that's something that interests you, you might want to look into it. And that, by the way, is gone into in very extensive detail in a paper called Lexical Semantics of a Machine Translation Interlingua by Robert Morneau, some of whose, the rest, I think, no, actually I haven't included these papers for you, but they're strongly recommended. Read them. They're quite good. LSMTAI is, however, a monograph, which means it's this guy's thesis, so it's quite long. I found it interesting, though. Yes?
Do you have a possible link to that? Because I was looking
Oh,
for
yeah,
that last
yeah.
night, and all the
I'll
links
post
that I
it.
found were dead. Thanks.
Last I checked, it was up. So, okay. And in any way, archive.org probably has it. Okay, so blah blah blah, syllable boundaries. Okay. So syllables. According to this language textbook, syllable boundaries are universal in how they're applied, which is you have, for example,
If you don't want your language to, distinguish between like a syllables, as in it's all like a stream, and
but you have to parse it into syllables to be able to pronounce it.
You only have so much room.
well, you can stop some in your random points, and it can be not important for your language.
True, but that's just saying that you don't care where the syllables are.
Yeah.
The syllables are still going to exist. And they'll still be referenced by sound change rules.
Well, you can have a language with no vowels, right? And then you don't have any syllables.
Actually, that's sort of a contested point. As far as I know, it's, you're using that as a vowel.
No.
Essentially. Well, you're using it syllabically. So yeah, you can have a language with no vowels, but you're going to have syllabics, and the syllabics are going to form the core of a phonotactic cluster, and therefore you're going to have syllable rules applying anyway.
So what about if your language is based on duration of how long you hum?
then you're going to be using a somewhat different thing. But if you have any consonants at all, you're going to have syllables.
Okay, well.
If you have consonants, you have syllables.
So how long? So like, what about in like, say you go? That's a consonant, right?
Yep.
And how about your language is defined by how long you say? Where's your vowel?
That's fine. I didn't say you needed a vowel to have syllables.
I thought you did. I thought you said a syllable was a consonant and a vowel.
No, that's not quite. For the purposes of that, a vowel is anything that is allowed to be at the root of a syllable, i.e., syllabics, vowels, etc. It doesn't have to be a true vowel. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay. So, someone pronounce this? It's in English.
Extreme.
Yes. So, first thing you do is, so these are the syllables, so vowel, vowel, right? Next step is what's called greedy onsets. So, any onset cluster that is allowable will take as much as is possible. So, this doesn't have any possible onset cluster, right? This has that. STR is an allowable onset cluster. So is TR, but STR is more than that. KSTR, is that allowable in English? No. So that's onset, and then everything else is coda. And you group these, and those are your syllables.
So why is it an X trim?
Because this is greedy.
Ah, it's greedy.
The onset is greedy. So the onset fills up as much as it's possible.
It doesn't have to though.
It does have to, according to this. According to this, it's universal.
It's universal.
Universal. Yes.
Well, not in my language, it's not.
So, if you want to create something that violates that or that plays with that, perhaps you can quite possibly. I don't know any reason to the contrary. So I'm going to say that it's plausible that you could have this rule also be something that you change, and you can say that it's grammatically relevant whether you say extreme or extreme or extreme or extreme or extreme, and where you place the syllable boundary. However, according to the textbook, that's not possible. That's all I'm going to say. Yes.
In Catalan,
Yes.
we would say extrem.
Extreme.
Extrem. The same word is extreme, and I'm sure we say extreme.
Extreme. Okay, but can you say strem?
No, nothing like that.
So then it's still following the same thing. It's just that you have a different onset cluster that's allowed. So STR is allowable in English. Is it allowable in Catalan?
No.
So you're still having a greedy onset.
Mm.
So there. So obviously, the minimal thing that you would need is syllabic roots. Like Yuri's example. If you want, you can just have no consonants. Everything is sonorant. Well, you can have consonants, but you have no stops or non-sonorant consonants, and then it's just things like that, and you don't necessarily need syllables. Okay, so let's see. Another thing is suprasegmentals, i.e. tone, namely. There's essentially two basic ways of doing tone. One is called register, and the other is contour. So register tones, you have a series of pitches, essentially, that are relatively defined, not absolutely, but they can be absolutely, actually. Although, obviously, it will depend by speaker, because people have low voices and people have high voices, and that doesn't affect what they're saying. So, you can say, for example, the word. Let's take straight. Straight, that's high. Straight, medium, straight, low. Or actually better, I'll take a 2-syllable word, or 3. Universal. How's that? So, universal, high. Universal, universal. So that's high, medium, and low. You can obviously have more than that. Some languages have 2, some have 3, some have 4. I'm not aware of any that have more than 4. So between those, let's say you have high, medium, and low. Then you can have pretty much any combination of those on one vowel. So you can have, for example, in Mandarin, you can have medium to high, which is you, high, low, high, so you, etc. So you can have any combination. Some languages do distinguish between, for example, medium to high versus low to high. So strong rising, weak rising, whatever. Any of those are allowable, really. Whatever you want is allowable. And there are some languages that are mixed, so if you want to do that, go ahead. The way that suprasegmentals are generally used is there are a few different things that are interacting. For one, each word will often have its own pitch. Like, for example, in Mandarin, there's horse, scold, mother, etc. Those are all separate words. They have their own separate pitch, or tone, rather. Then you'll have other effects that modify that. For example, in Mandarin, if I remember correctly, there's the common greeting of hello is ni hao. Both of those are third tone, which is ni, falling, rising. Ni hao. But when you're actually pronouncing it, you don't say ni hao. You say ni hao. So the second one gets changed, and that's essentially a sound change roll. The second.
The ni gets changed. How does it? Yeah, it's
Are you
ni,
sure?
how. Yeah, when you have several third tones in a row, the first few become second.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. It's been a couple years. So, but essentially it's the same thing. You have a sound change rule, you have a context where it applies. In this case, you have 2 third tones in a row. And then you have what it changes to, whereas the first one changes to a first tone or whatever it is. It's the second tone, I think it changes.
Yeah,
to,
the third tone changes to second tone.
Yeah.
It works for chains. Like if you have 3 third tones in a row, first 2 become second, and
Yeah.
it's third.
Exactly. So you can have that, which applies also. You can have the tone change be grammatical. Like, for example, you raise tones in a word to change a tense. You can try applying. Like if you have usually 3-syllable words, you can say this particular pattern of tones represents this grammatical structure, sort of like Arabic does with vowels. You can do with tones, and say, for example, universal versus universal versus universal are all the same word but different grammatical inflections. Yeah. And obviously you can use it for whatever else. Another thing that's interesting is that in natural languages, when you have tones following each other, if, for example, you have a low tone following a low tone, sometimes it'll be required that the low tone is lower than the previous tone. So you'll get a gradual descent, and the overall tone will sort of go in waves. And then when you start a new sentence or something, you reset. Or whatever other reasons. So it's an idea. And as I briefly mentioned, when you borrow from other languages, as you may be doing for Conlang, and you probably will, at least if you're trying to translate names, transliterate names into your language, rather than requiring people to create a new name within the language, like for example, translating the meaning of their name into the meaning in your conlang. But if you're trying to translate, say, David into your conlang, then it's going to need to apply the phonology of your conlang. Like, for example, if D is not different than T, then it might change to Tavid or David, or if D doesn't exist, it'll go to the closest thing. Or if V doesn't exist, but you say have a then it might go to Dathid, because V is an allowable sound. So you'll just move it to whatever's closest. And you'll apply the phonotactics. So, yeah. So that'll be continued later on.
Question.
Yes.
For tones, is there some standard way of denoting it? I mean, I know in Mandarin you can
Yes.
have those tone marks, but how do you match up use those with diacritic marks? Okay.
IPA has symbols for it.
I see.
The other way you can do it is with a subscript of H, L, MH, things like that, where you say what the pattern
What's
is.
a global rise? Is it just an overall rise in
Yeah.
all tones?
So
And a down step and up step, how's that different?
tone can change within a word, it can change within a syllable, it can change over the course of a sentence. We have that in English, where if you're asking a question, your tone slowly rises, or if you're really unsure of yourself, then you say statements like questions, which sounds really silly, but I've seen a lot of people, mainly female, who do that. It's sort of a weird cultural thing here. So yes, you can have a tone language that also has intonation, which is what that is called. And it's essentially you have local conformity, where each thing is still higher or same or lower than the previous, but you also have sort of an overall contour that biases.
So what's the difference between a down step and a global fall?
Sorry?
The difference between a down step and a global fall?
Where is that?
Bottom. Down step, global fall. Or up step and a global
Oh,
rise.
I think it's that global rise and fall aren't applied to specific syllables; they're applied sort of overall. But tones are not my specialty, so I'm not searching. Looking up.
You're the teacher.
It's the facilitator.
That's right. You get to look it up for homework and tell us on Friday.
I get forget about it right then. And then 5 minutes.
Yes, you could. So that is pretty much the end of sound systems. So we have a few more minutes left. Any questions on anything I've gone over in sound systems? Anything I've not mentioned that I should and I'm secret about? Or anything else that you'll need before creating it?
Some more guidelines like the note that the onset things are greedy and always
Yeah.
try to grab all of the
That-
parts they can.
Supposedly.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
Are there any other
None
universal or close to universals
Oh,
that
yeah.
we should be aware of?
There's something called balance, which is partially an aesthetic thing and partially a supposed universal, although it's more of a trend, which is it's really rare to have a phonology, a phonology, not a phonetics inventory, that only has one example of a particular natural class, except for nasals, which is relatively common. So it's really rare that you're going to have, for example, only one alveolar sound, or only one plosive, or only one voiced consonant.
But you can have only one nasal, as you said.
Yeah, but even that is relatively rare.
Japanese.
Japanese has it,
Yeah.
true, but English, for example, has two.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, English has three.
It's not really used in English though.
Sing.
That's
No,
yeah.
it's sing. If I said sin, that means something different. Doesn't
Some good.
it? Yeah, but it's not sing good. It's sing.
Right.
But
Fair enough.
Japanese has both M and N.
But M is not.
It has them both phonetically, but it doesn't have them both phonologically.
Whereas
For example, in Japanese, the same thing is one letter, and it's not contrastive. You're not going to find... Oh, wait. I'm thinking of... Sorry, I'm an idiot. I'm thinking of the single letter. So yes, you're right. It has both M and N. I forgot about the others.
There's the mom.
Stupid me. Yes. So yeah, Japanese has both M and N also. So I don't have an example of one that has only M. But I can't think of one offhand, but I do remember reading that they exist. So I don't know. No idea. So also that goes with clicks. If you want to have clicks, it's unusual for real languages to actually just have one click. You usually have more. And usually if you have one thing in a particular natural class, you'll have more in other variants in the same natural class. Like if you have bilabial plosives and you have fricatives, you'll probably have bilabial fricatives. Maybe, maybe not. English doesn't, but it's something to consider. Did you have a question? Okay.
Yeah. How do you denote an IPA the Japanese fu?
Fu?
Because it's pronounced sometimes fu and sometimes fu, depending on the word. So how do you pronounce that?
Fu. It's a bilabial fricative.
But it's pronounced like different ways depending on the word and depending on who says it.
Well, then it might be that, or it might be that. F, as in English, is labial dental.
That's not Japanese one though. It's not. It's more.
Yeah, which is just a
Yeah.
bilabial.
Fu.
That's that. Any other questions? Any qualms about making your sound system? Anything like that? Obviously, what I'm asking you for next Friday is a sketch. You don't have to have it complete. You're going to have plenty more time before it's going to be like the overall thing is due. So you have plenty of time to add stuff and modify things. So don't be afraid of that. But yeah,
why do we start with phonetics and not with other things?
as opposed to.
Lexic or
Because it is hard to make rules without having the phonetics, and very often the morphology and the phonology will be the morphology and the sound change rules and things like that will refer to this. And yes, they are all interconnected. So to some degree, it's sort of arbitrary which one you do first, because even this, you may have noticed, I've been referring to morphemes and things like that, which I haven't introduced yet. But it's not really possible to get around that. So the way I'm choosing is that I'm going to introduce all the modes first. So next class is on writing systems, and make sure you get a reader by then, hopefully.
Who's the reader?
We'll say in a second. So that's actually somewhat heretical in formal linguistics, because formal linguistics doesn't consider writing a real language. It's just sort of a code for speech,
So
which I strongly disagree with.
Yeah.
But
So Latin isn't a real language?
that's quite true. What?
So Latin isn't a real language because it's not spoken.
No. Written Latin is not a separate, real part of language. It's just a code for spoken language. Spoken Latin, which isn't used. So it's a bastardization. But yeah, if you ask linguistics professors things like that, they won't tell it to you like that because that's not PC. But essentially,
Say it in high academia.
yes, very high academese, and defend why it's true. So I disagree, so I'm doing it my way. So after writing systems is signing systems, and then we'll have a basis of modes in which to encode things, and then we'll talk about what we're encoding, and in what order, and things like that, and that's morphology and syntax. And that's probably going to take a while because it's really complicated. So I might I might do sort of a brief sketch of morphosyntax first, and then see what you guys want to go into more detail on, because it's a really complicated topic, and the stuff in this is really, really brief compared to a good treatment method. So there's that. I don't know. So that's all for today, I guess.